Is Sister Rania here?
No, she was feeling sick. She
She's,
tried to come. We were even going to try to do it together, but she was sick.
okay.
But I had a friend come with me instead.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
she's
Okay,
not
let me, I
feeling
think I
well.
received another link.
Yes, she has the YouTube.
She does.
Yeah, she already has.
So you have it.
Yeah, she sent it to me. My
Okay.
friend, one of our, someone that works at.
So it's cool.
She's
We can go
sending it out
forward,
for
right?
PACC. Yes.
Yeah. So. Can you see yourself? You see yourself there? You see yourself, right? Open it and see if you're on. You see it, right? Okay. Okay, you good? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين. We are today honored with the presence of Sister Basma Bsharat. She's from the she's in Palestine Education Director from the Palestine American Community Center, PACC. Her work and the organizational work have been tremendous in trying to bring awareness to the Muslim community outside the Muslim community related to Palestinian issues, and not only what's happening now, but also the history of Palestine. So we are blessed to have her here to speak to us about this matter, inshallah, and she's going to provide you some educational materials and also speak about Palestine, but also not only that, she will be speaking about our community, how they will be able to use this information as well, the resources for them, not only to bring awareness about the Palestinian issues, but also to protect ourselves from this campaign that is not only against our brothers and sisters in Palestine, but also against our Muslim community here, where they're trying to speak out about the genocide that was going on. So without further ado, we'll introduce Sister Basma, inshallah, and then there will be questions and answers afterwards. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So thank you, brother. My name is Basma Bsharat. Just leave it like that. Okay, thank you. My name is Basma Bsharat. I am the Palestine Education Director. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. So today, I wanted to touch upon the history, and then we'll go into present-day situation, and then leave room for question and answer and actions that we can take. So obviously, the current escalation has started in response to what happened on October 7th. But something that we have to remember and we have to stress and emphasize is that this was not started on October 7th. This originated back from the 1900s. So I want to start with talking about the 1948 Nakba. So I'm going to play a video, hopefully it'll work, just to start us off with an explanation of how the Nakba happened. This video was posted 70 years ago, but the Nakba was in 1948. So the occupation has started and the Nakba has been ongoing since 1948, so for 75 years now. So this escalation did not start this month, it started long before. So, let's play this video.
Pushed into refugee camps in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and neighboring countries. But the Nakba didn't end in 1948. The catastrophe continues to affect more than 12 million Palestinians.
So I could just talk about it instead of doing the videos. So what the video talks about is just showing you how the Nakba originated. So May 15th, 1948, was the establishment of Israel, and the establishment of Israel only occurred with the Nakba. So during the Nakba, which translates in Arabic to the catastrophe, 750,000 Palestinians were expelled from their homes. From those, there was also 15,000 that were killed. And I think it's important to note the numbers, right? So we lost 750,000. That was 80% of the population at the time. Those were all moved to refugee camps in other areas of Palestine, as well as outside neighboring countries, including Lebanon, Egypt, and others. From those, 15,000 were killed, and if you compare it right now, since October 7th, up until yesterday, I didn't even look at the updated numbers today, probably more than 8,000 have been killed in just these past 20 or so days. So what we're dealing with right now is an unprecedented attack by Israel. So I just want to start with the Nakba from there, and then this video talks a lot about the history, a lot of it. So first, Britain after World War I, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Britain and France controlled different parts of the world, and Palestine was one of the areas that was taken by Britain. So if anyone knows their history. So Britain took Palestine, and then after World War II, we all know what happened then, the Holocaust. So there was this European guilt over what happened, so there was a huge refugee Jewish population, right? Because after the Holocaust, so many Jews were killed, and then there were so many that became refugees that didn't have a place to live. So part of the solution was finding one place that the Jewish people could live, so one Jewish country. Now, I don't know if anyone knows this here, but before Palestine was proposed, there was actually different countries that were thought of. So one proposition was Argentina, another was somewhere in the continent of Africa, I believe. And then the reason Palestine was chosen was because of its historical significance. So we all know for Muslims, for Christians, and for Jews, Palestine is a holy land, because Jerusalem is a holy land. We have the Aqsa, we have the Ibrahimi masjids, we have the oldest churches in Palestine. So it made sense for Palestine to be proposed. So it made sense that, okay, well, let's choose Palestine. So that's why we started, and it's important to note also that Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and Jews had lived peacefully in Palestine before the establishment of Israel. One key, I'm not going to play the video, but the next thing that I wanted to talk about with this was Zionism. So there's a big distinction between Judaism and Zionism. Judaism is a religion, right? That we don't have a problem with Judaism. The issue is with Zionism. Zionism is a political ideology, and it's rooted in white supremacy, and supports the creation of a Zionist state, so an Israeli state, to sustain the Jewish state in occupied Palestine. So the problem isn't with the religion, the problem is with the Zionist ideology. This idea that the Jewish people need a state, and the fact is that that state has to be Palestine because that was what was chosen. And there was this concept of a land for a people, a land for a people on a land that didn't have people. I'm paraphrasing. So the idea is that there were no people here, so the land is for us as a people without a land. But that obviously is not true because Palestinians were living there. So the only way the Zionist state could be established is through the expulsion and killing of Palestinians. And that's when we got the Nakba. So before the Nakba happened, there was an influx of Jewish migration that was supported from Britain. Britain helped the Zionist state to get established, and then soon later, other allies, including the US, started to support the establishment of Israel as well. So it's with this backing that Israel was established. The next major term that I want to go over is settler colonialism. Oh, sorry. So let me just put this in a bigger slideshow. So, and I'm sure that everyone's been hearing the term settler colonialism. So settler colonialism is a form of colonialism and a system of power that in and of itself establishes the state of Israel through dispossession, so taking land and ownership from Palestinians that are already living there, or any indigenous community that already lives in the state, genocide and repression of the indigenous people's land and culture. So to form Israel, the only way this could happen was through settler colonialism, by removing the indigenous population that was already living there. And this is not something only to Palestine. This is something that we've seen time and time again in our history. Even the establishment of the US was created through the settler colonialism of the indigenous Native American population. Okay, I'm not going to go back to this one. I'm just jumping in between different slides. Okay. So this was more of an open-ended question. So as Muslims here, whether you're Palestinian or not, do you think that understanding the Palestinian struggle is important? Why or why not? So the answer to this question is, it is very important for all of us, especially now, because we see the response and we see the propaganda that is going around about Palestine. There's a lot of anti-Palestinian rhetoric, there's a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric, and a lot of it is rooted in propaganda that is, honestly, a lot of it is false. A lot of it is reliant on ignorance. So for us as Muslims, we have to understand the history and understand the context so that we can fight back against it and speak up against it. To know the understanding and to have the truth is what's going to help us and to help liberate Palestine. I'm going to skip through some of these. So we talked about this. So this is just some of the history, but I'm going to skip over this. I talked about this a little bit already. So this was in 1917. This was just the Balfour Declaration. So British basically promising Israel to be established in Palestine. But something interesting about it is, if you look at it, it says, where is it right here? There's one line that said that this shall be done, which may not prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. So Britain agreed to support Israel, but said that you have to this cannot infringe upon the rights of the non-Jewish people, which is Palestinians. Thank you. So, the next thing I wanted to show was a map of Palestine and the escalating loss of land. So if you look at historic Palestine, this is before any of the land was started being taken from Israel. So this, first we had, this is all of Palestine. Then we started taking some of the partition from 1937, so some of it was taken away. Then 1947, so we know the Nakba was 1948, we started having a lot more of the land taken away. So the Palestinian was green, and then more of it was lost. And then by 67, we see the separation between the West Bank and Gaza. So this is a very important concept that we all need to know, is Gaza and the West Bank are all part of Palestine. I want to zoom in here because if you see how small, from comparing it to the larger the larger country of Palestine, how small Gaza is, the Gaza Strip, and then the West Bank. So if you notice, we have this huge gap between Gaza and the West Bank. So part of the partition plan and the separation was taking everything down here for Israel and then giving Palestine some of the land. Now, why was it separated physically? We have this huge barrier. This was very intentional on the part of Israel. Because if you have people divided, it's easier to control them, it's easier to separate them. So there were two different governances. So Gaza had became its own government, and the West Bank had its own. So this is something I want to talk about in terms of unity. So one thing that you'll see in a lot of the political ideologies in Palestine and among the people of Palestine is that if once you're divided, it's much easier to control. It's much easier to keep them under the Israeli power. And this goes the same, I think, with us as Muslims. If we're separated and each one is focusing on themselves and we're divided, it's much easier to control. And this is why there is a big emphasis right now in the fact that we have to be united for Palestine. Because this is what they hope on, that we forget, that we don't pay attention, that we lose track, and then we end up with the Zionist goal, which is to take all of Palestine. And then if you notice here, this map was 2020. If you know, even within the West Bank, there's less and less of it because the establishment of settlements, so Israeli settlers became more and more. So even within the West Bank, you see so much more bigger of a land loss. So I did want to talk a little bit about the difference between Gaza and the West Bank. So with the separation of Gaza and the West Bank, we ended up eventually having two separate states or separate governances. So I just want to look at the exact date. So because I know this is like the biggest question I've been getting, especially with people that are non-Palestinian, is but what about Hamas? What did they do? And isn't it their fault? One thing that we have to remember is that Hamas didn't come into power until the late 80s. And they were voted by the people of Gaza. And then Gaza was actually put under siege later, so in 2005. So putting it into context, the Nakba started in 1948. So from 1948 till 1987, we didn't even have the political party of Hamas. So that was the Israeli goal, and the Israeli regime, the apartheid regime, which I'll talk about in a little, was happening long before what we have in Gaza. So that's one thing that's very important to keep in mind, and that's something that you can definitely talk about when someone asks you this question, that why did this party didn't even come into power until much later, until after so much of this is happening. And then with that, actually I'll talk about that later in the Q&A. So we have the separation of Gaza and the West Bank. So in 2005, Israel actually decided to leave its land control in Gaza. So they left Gaza, so any on-the-ground or military control inside of Gaza, they pulled out of, but they kept Gaza under siege. So Gaza still remained under a blockade. This is why you hear the term the open-air prison. So they say, well, they left Gaza, they left them to their own power. That's not true. They may not be there on the ground, but they're surrounding on all ends. So they, after the 1967 Six-Day War, they ended up keeping power outside. So there's a blockade. Everyone by now is probably hearing that Gaza is under a blockade. They're in an open air prison, meaning that they don't have any way to enter or leave without going through Israel. So there's a blockade on the land and sea, and any items there's no items going in or out. So that's all through illegal apartheid, right? So Israel still has this illegal control over Gaza. The other situation in the West Bank, so this is West Bank does not have Hamas. The governing party is the PLO. So in the West Bank, you still have Israel as a governing body. So it's a military control, a military operation. And I want to show a video that just shows it, even if you don't hear. I want to just say Palestinians. So this video talks about the concept of apartheid. So in the West Bank, because Israel remains in power with the Palestinian Authority under Israel, you have apartheid, which is a term that shows that even though there are both Palestinians and Israelis living there, Palestinians are treated as second-class citizens. They are segregated, so there's different roads, they have different IDs. There are any area that is Israeli, so that are settlements, shopping centers, public places that are Israeli. There are areas that Palestinians, if they have the Palestinian ID, so from the West Bank, they are not allowed in. So they're treated as second-class citizens in their own homes. So I just want to show a video of how that. Oh, no, not this one. This shows that. Sorry. Sorry, these ads. So I'll show the Aqsa instead. So this is in Al-Quds, so you'll see, you don't really need the sound for this, but you see the presence of Israeli armed soldiers and then also settlers. So in the West Bank, this is constant. This was in during Friday Jum'ah prayer, but so there's still restrictions. So even while everything that's happening in Gaza, because Gaza, they're getting the bombardment and the bombing, everyone in Al-Quds actually is still facing on the ground issues. So Palestinians are getting shot at or threatened by both soldiers and settlers. So a settler is any Israeli that's come to live in a settlement and has been invited by Israel to join this. So the Israeli settlers are not civilians because they come on settlements, they come on stolen land with the purpose to settle on Palestinian land. And they're actually being armed by Israeli army to help in pushing out more Palestinians. A couple of days ago, I was reading a leaflet that is going around in the West Bank telling Palestinians there, if you don't leave and go to Jordan now before we kill you or before we shoot you. These are from the army and these are from settlers too. So Palestinians are being threatened in both places. Obviously the focus right now is on Gaza because of the siege, and we right now are asking for an immediate ceasefire because of how many losses are and how much damage is being done by the bombs. But at the same time, we also have the issue of the West Bank, that Israel's presence there is not peaceful. It is not allowing Palestinians a free life. They're under apartheid. They're under settler colonialism, just the same. So this was just a video talking about how much the army and the settlers will attack and kill Palestinians in the West Bank as well. And then also the idea, I can't find the video of it, but the idea of the checkpoints, that Palestinians that live in the West Bank, any kind of movement or transportation is limited. They have no freedom of movement. So they have to use their IDs wherever they go. They have to go through these checkpoints where it's overfilled with people and you spend hours waiting just to get somewhere that's as close as 20 minutes because you are under Israeli occupied land. And I think, okay, so I think I'll stop in the presentation for this part. I did want to talk now about resources that we have today, and then and then we could do the Q&A. So this is on our website. This is our toolkit. So this is a PACC Solidarity and Advocacy Social Media Toolkit. And I have a QR code. You could also look it up, packusa.org/toolkit. So the context of this toolkit was obviously right now a lot is happening. I hope that was kind of an overview of what happens in Palestine, but now we want to talk about the present day because that's obviously what we're seeing in the media and what we're seeing now from everyone around us, friends, families, coworkers, now that everyone is asking about Palestine. So this toolkit will give you first just a little bit of context over how this started. So I did want to mention that packusa.org/toolkit, one word. This is the QR code. This is the QR code, but I could show you. So it's packusa.org/toolkit. The HTML you don't have to write down. Okay. So a lot of people, again, like we said, the mainstream media will paint what's happening right now to be the fault of Hamas and that it just started on October 7th. However, I myself was reading and writing about this the week before, so I think it was October the 2nd. There was an increase in settler violence. So I talked about Israeli settlements in the West Bank. So there's been a tremendous increase in settlements in the West Bank. And with an increase in settlements, there's an increase in settler violence. So settlers are armed. They will go around in towns that are supposed to be where Palestinians are living, and they will threaten and they will even shoot at Palestinians. So there was a very high increase in this right before, so in the beginning of October. I think it was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was 1 in 4 attacks, I think, in a day. So there was, since last January, a big increase in settler violence and settler attacks on Palestinians. Specifically in Al-Quds, that was a video I showed before, a high presence of army and then of settlers that were attacking Palestinians. So that's one thing that was happening already. So that's something that we have to remember for the context of what's happening now. So the social media toolkit does talk about that a little bit in the beginning. Then we also we have a resource guide here. So this is a longer term goal, but I highly encourage everyone to spend time reading. I know that books are harder, but some of the key books are written out here. We also have links to podcasts and then articles that help as well. And then I'm going to show the social media. I know we're all looking at social media. I think now is a very important time to center Palestinian voices on the ground, because as we see in this mainstream media, we are getting a very false, very one-sided story to what's happening. So when you want to know what's really going on, advocating for and highlighting the voices of the Palestinians there in Gaza right now and in the West Bank as well is important for understanding what's really happening. We also have here links to our PACC education programs. So talking points, something that right now I'm sure everyone is getting from coworkers and people who didn't know about this before is these questions like what about Palestine? What's going on there? Where did this come from? When did this happen? The talking points will really help you with how to answer that. Sound bites is the same thing. If you ever find yourself being asked by a journalist or media questions, because it's happening now, people are actually asking about Palestine. This will help you with that. The media will as well. And then also we've included on how to talk to children about Palestine, because obviously we're all feeling what's going on, and whether we say it to our kids directly or indirectly, they know that there's something happening too. So we have lists of books, and there's some videos, and then just a guide on how you can talk to your kids about this as well. Then we've got the social media. We have captions made for you to help, the accounts you can follow, graphics you can follow or use if you'd like, donations for on the ground, because like we said, in Gaza, we have a blockade, we have a siege. So we know recently we heard, well, some aid trucks were going in. It's a very limited amount of aid trucks, and I'm not even sure how much of it is actually getting to the Palestinians in Gaza. So one thing that we're encouraging is to look at organizations that have already had people on the ground inside, because those were the ones that they're able to get the money and then buy supplies for the people of Gaza. So these are linked here. We also have have support for us as Palestinian Americans. I didn't really talk about this as much today, but we all have heard, I'm sure, about Wadi al-Fayoumi, the 6-year-old who was killed. And here in New Jersey, there's been so many incidents of hate and one-sided narratives being pushed against Palestinians, Palestinian Americans. So we have CARE has a really good Know Your Rights guide. They have an incident report form, so if you face any issue, please report it, because if we don't report it, we're not going to let our voices be heard. I think this is a really important time for us to make sure we let our voices be heard. The Muslim community, the Palestinian community, all of us together, we are such a large part of the community. We've done so much within our communities, right? Here in America, we have to make sure that now that we've put so much into our community, we let our voices be heard, and we say, like, we are not supporting this. We are demanding an end to this. We are demanding an immediate end to the bombing. We demand a ceasefire. We demand that our tax dollars not be used for this. By making your voices heard, so signing, we have linked here letters to our officials. I think I have the action items in the next one over here. By filling out the action items and calling your members of Congress and filling out these forms, we are doing as much as we can, and of course, number one, dua and prayer, to help with the people in Palestine. It's a duty on all of us. One thing also here, we've included all the contact info for CARE New Jersey. So if you feel like you've had an issue from a school or from work or even in public, which a lot of people have been telling us, we at our center have been getting a very high rate of calls about parents talking about how afraid they are for their kids, or young adults are worried about them as college students, or people that work, and they're afraid to talk, they're afraid to speak up. And we have these resources, but we need everyone to use them. And then one more thing, and I'm very proud to say that I think this has been making a difference, we're seeing it, is BDS. So BDS was very popular years ago, and actually a lot of states, so you know that it works. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. The fact that so many states were making BDS illegal shows you it makes a difference, right? Our money and where we put our funds, it's being noticed. So right now there are targeted boycotts, so not a general boycott, but if you go to the website and knowing what to boycott, you'll see there are targeted boycotts now being spread on social media. They're noticing, they're paying attention. So when you do these, like just refraining from purchasing places that support Israel, you are making a difference. And then we have more petitions here that you could also sign from CARE, USCPR, AJP, and AMP. Okay, so that's the end of the toolkit. One thing, it's not on here, but I have flyers up in the front. Next Saturday, there is a national march. This is being organized nationwide. So I was on a call, we have people coming from Chicago, we have people coming from all over, inshallah. If we come up in large numbers to join together and to be unified, we will make everyone see, because we know what unfortunately the US government is now aiding and completely supporting and working alongside Israel on this. So we have to make our voices heard and make it known that we do not support this. We are not in favor of this, and we are completely against this. But it's only gonna happen if we speak up and we do something. I also have other events. There's also another rally tomorrow in Newark. I have a flyer for here. That is also all on our Instagram page. Okay, so I think that I'm done with my presentation. Any questions? Thank you. Do you want to use this one?
Jazakallah khair, Sister Basma, for the presentation. Inshallah, we'll open this for questions and answers. And I'm sure there is someone who's waiting to ask the question. Please go ahead. You give you the mic now.
Well, a question? Is it a question? I just want to say that's what we read from Google and YouTube. I am Palestinian. My parents left Palestine during the Nakba. So I know the story, like, big time. And what I heard, I wasn't disputing what you're saying. and I am not against Palestinians. The opposite, I love all Palestinians. They're my family. So I wanted to correct, because this is all Google, and what is Google? It's Zionist. So
which part were you saying is
well,
wrong?
the part of it is when you think about the Jews were the time of 48 there. So basically after the Second World War, Balfour was much before that. So that means they chose Palestine before even the Jews were expelled from Europe.
Well, I said that it was
Yeah,
they wanted a place. They wanted so the Jewish people they wanted to put them somewhere, and it was
that
keep
was
Palestine and
the
it's not
Zionists
Palestinian.
who wanted
Right.
a strange body in the Middle East, separating West and East to irritate the entire area and make us separated like all that you see right now. So that's what it was. So even the Western world and the Christians, they want to get rid of the Jews. They didn't give them
Yeah.
Palestine because they love them. They want them to die over there with the Arabs.
Well, I said it was this guilt, right? They said they didn't know there was anti-Semitism in Europe at the time. And that's what led to all this. They wanted to, it was a way to get rid of the Jewish population and said, okay, well, we have this guilt and we made this mistake. We'll just give them Palestine, whether or not we started this. We support. They did. It was with their support.
It was the choice of Ben-Gurion when he went to the Zionists and said, hey, I am here. I could take this role. So it wasn't really meant only the Jews. They don't care about them. And the Zionists, as we said, explained that is a movement that cares about only money, nothing else. Basically, all of the rich people are, and one of them is Google. So I don't care about all of this. That's what I wanted to say. So.
Well, it was because there are a lot of people who don't know the history and don't know the context.
Yeah, why I was upset, not upset, but I wanted to explain to the people who doesn't know what's the story is. People don't really care about the Jews, and the Jews, basically even the Jews themselves, the Zionist Jews brought them over there. They don't know they're gonna die. They didn't know that. They're going to fight, basically. So that's what the story is.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I don't. Then that's. You're right. I mean, even with the formation of the state of Israel, a lot of Jews did not agree because even historically, Judaism, there's a belief that they can't have a homeland because that goes against the religion. But again, Zionism is not Judaism. It's a political ideology, and it just goes back. The goal is, no matter what, it's to take the land, and no matter how it happens, which is through killing, right? Exactly. It's not religion, it's political ideology.
So I think the Balfour Accord, 1917, they did say we want to provide to Jews, as a Zionist, they want to provide the Jews a place where to stay. As a matter of fact, they were choosing two places. It was one in Kenya.
Yeah.
Kenya was a country. Chile too.
knew
And then
Argentina,
say
yeah.
Palestine. So what they did, they say, okay, since Palestine has no one there living there, and the Jews have no place to live, we're going to give you Palestine. But what they did not say, that Palestinians were living in Palestine at that time.
Exactly.
That's the story.
Exactly.
So they say, okay, we give you. That was in 1917. And the creation of State of Israel in 1948. Obviously, the Jews start moving in, and slowly, and they were killing the Arabs. They were torturing the Arabs. They were actually bombing places. They were doing a lot of things during that time, right?
Yeah.
Right.
1909, they saw that the Arabs, they have resources in their countries, they have a lot of money in there, so they thought that can continue this way. They were scared of having the Arabs, the Muslims in general, So basically, that's what that was. The decision is putting irritation in between them in the Middle East, separating East and West.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what's the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's a major issue we can look at even today. Why is it so? When you see before in the history, when the Arabs were united, they were able to support Palestinians and support all of our countries. Right now, why is it we're 21 days today into this, and the Arab world we've still not solved it. If the Muslim world and the Arab world united, we wouldn't be having this problem.
That's right. Well, again, we said Zionists,
Yeah.
only Jews, Zionists,
Yes.
Muslims, and we have that.
Christians too.
Christian, Muslims, and Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There was a question
anyone want
there.
to ask questions? Yes.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Basma, for your
وإياكم.
this beautiful presentation. My question now is, there's a big issue sending aids to people of Gaza, our brothers and sisters. On the other hand, there's a lot of organization ask for donation. Should I donate? Who should choose? So this is, we need to be delighted on this. What should we do? Should we wait? And please let us know.
Good question. So I think it depends on personal preference. So there are different organizations that do different things. So I mentioned the ones that we put in our toolkit. The reason there's so many, mashallah, organizations that help. We put those because when everything started, those were the few that we knew and confirmed that there's people on the ground inside, that if we send it, inshallah, they'll get, we hope, they get the money and they go and buy the supplies themselves. There are a lot of organizations collecting, but if they're not inside, what they're doing is, from my understanding generally, they're collecting the aid, saving it, and waiting. As soon as they're able to get in or get the money across, they're going to send it. So, like inshallah, the money that you donate will still make it, but it just depends on how soon it'll get there. If that makes sense, yeah. Yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I have a question on, especially in our workplaces and our schools, how do we have a conversation with other, I want to say, Christians and people that are not Muslims, and even our fellow Jewish friends, that this is not a neutral war.
Yeah.
This is not just about maintaining neutrality and saying, well, what about their side? Because I was recently having a conversation with a teacher, and they were saying, I have friends on the other side, and I know that they're also very frustrated because of the quote-unquote hostages on the other side. But they were really upset and said that there's two sides to every story, and that Israel and Palestine, or Gaza, needs to come into a room and just come up with a solution. I think we're far from that. So how do you maintain and convey that there's really no neutrality? It is literally free Palestine.
Great question. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I think there's a lot of ways you can go about this. One thing I would tell you, first off, before this, I think that if you're dealing with someone who's really asking, like in that way, to go through the points of discussion. But before that, if you feel like there's someone, sometimes people, if they're like, because people have this issue too, they'll have someone who's coming and kind of attacking you. Oh, well, like basically they'll go with the propaganda. If it's so far in, I would say sometimes there's a point where there's not even a point to engage, but you have to kind of pick and choose. So that's one thing. Some situations, especially if it's hostile, not to even engage. I know that it's very tempting, but sometimes it's not even worth it. But with a situation like what you're saying with work, there's a lot of points that we can make. One way I've been answering this, because I just went through this a couple of days ago with a group, like every playbook in the propaganda was said to me. One thing we can say is that Palestinians, first, we know this has been going on for 75 years, right? Palestinians have tried and have compromised so much. If you look back at the Oslo Accords, we gave up, we only had, from what we had before then, we ended up with 20% of our land we gave up and said we're compromised for peace. They gave all of that up. Israel has not given up anything. The opposite. They take more and more land. They settle more and more. There are all of these UN violations, right? The settlements that keep growing are all illegal, but they continue. The violence towards Palestinians, they continue. So that's one thing you can say. It is not equal. It is an occupier, and using the right language is very important too. There's an occupier and an occupied. When you have equal sides, it's equal people fighting. That's not what we have here. Alhamdulillah, we have social media, which gives you firsthand. If you look up on the ground what happens in Gaza, you see the bombing, you see the killing. And then you can look it up a couple miles away in what's Israel, they're perfectly fine. The complaint is like, we have less resources. That is not equal. That is not equal with the unfairness. In terms of the hostages, there are, I want to say more than 10,000, but I could be wrong, it could be more, Palestinians that are illegally detained in the West Bank. Palestinians, a lot of minors, they will be, and this is happening now too. It continues, it's getting worse actually in the West Bank right now, where they do raids. The Israeli army will raid villages. They will take Palestinians, especially youth, arrest them. They won't know why they're getting arrested. They won't know why they've gone after them. And they will detain them. If they retain a lawyer, they won't even know what the reason is. And they'll indefinitely detain Palestinians for years and years and years. With the hostage situation, the hostages that were taken, they've been, from what we've seen, and we're seeing the stories that come out, they've all been kept safe. They've taken care of them. The idea was to have a bargaining chip to be able to take back Palestinian prisoners. And even then, they've released them without any conditions. So that's another thing. One thing that I do want to talk about, I was just talking with a friend earlier today about this, was the Great March. In 2018, so just a few years ago, the people of Gaza decided, we want to peacefully protest. And all they did was march to the border for months. And more than 2,000 Palestinians were shot and killed. And they remained peaceful. No one saw it on the news. No, I don't know, maybe if anyone raises their hand, who knows about the Great March? Not many people. So that's another thing we could say. Like, Palestinians for years and years now have been trying and have been peacefully protesting, but it didn't make any headlines or make any notice. So that's another point we could make. Again, I think the emphasis should be on the context of the situation. The root cause and the root violence is the violence that Israel imposes upon the Palestinians.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for this lecture. I have some comments and I also have a question. The question is easy. It's about the scarf, this black and white scarf. Black and white scarf. I remember in the time of Arafat, it was red and white. And then all of a sudden, the red and white disappeared and it was black and white. I was in Jerusalem in February and I saw it and I got a couple of them and they were in my suitcase. And then when this started, I retrieved it. So I wanted to know if there's any particular historical context about this scarf. Is there any significance? That's my question. And then I'll comment.
Yes, okay, so I'm have to look it up because I want to give you all the details of this. That's a good question. So the kufiya, or the hatta, does have a symbolic significance. I do want to look at it so I can give you the right information. I have a picture of it over here. I can show you. Okay. So each part of it is significant. So I think one part represents fishnets because of the fishers in Palestine. I want to look it up to project it for you, but you could just give me a second. So if you look at the image, there was a nice diagram, this one. So the fishnets is this part. So to represent, the fishnet pattern represents the connection between the sea. So if you know, Gaza is on the shore, so the water, so their livelihood is from fishing. So that's why the fishnets. This pattern is the olive leaves, because we know the Palestinians, especially in the West Bank, rely on the olive harvest and the olive trees. So that's a major symbol of Palestinians. And then this part is bolded to represent trade routes through Palestine. So the history of the trade between Palestinians and the travel and cultural exchange. So this is the symbolic significance. So this is what it represents. It's interesting you brought up the kufiya, because now I feel like here it's becoming this threat, so that people are threatened by the kufiya, and it's just a symbol of Palestinian. It's a representation of being Palestinian and being in support of Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comment, twofold. First, it's to all of us here. We say we support Palestine, but how many of us have actually visited Jerusalem? And as Muslims, we are supposed to visit Jerusalem. We're supposed to be Mecca, Medina, and Al-Aqsa. Brother Tariq from Celebrate Mercy made it his life's mission to take as many Muslims over there as possible. And one of the comments he made is that if Muslims populate Al-Aqsa, it will be difficult for the Zionists to take over the mosque. It's like someone trying to take over the Kaaba or the mosque in Medina. It's impossible. We need to visit Jerusalem. It can be difficult. Yes, there were soldiers at the entrance to get into the mosque. Yes, there were harassments, but we went and we came back. So we need to visit Jerusalem. Buy your tickets and go there. Be there. Make sujood on the rock. Make sujood in Masjid Qibli. One of the beautiful things about Palestinians is their devotion to Allah. It's about a 2-mile walk from the street to Masjid Qibli. They are there at 4 a.m. in the morning, making tahajjud, there for Salatul Fajr, making salawat, and they're very generous. You will have breakfast in the masjid after Salat. They'll give you freshly baked bread, and they have nothing. They are so devoted to Allah despite everything they're going through, and that is motivation for those of us here. We need to go to Jerusalem. Don't be afraid. Go. Go to Jerusalem like you go to Mecca, like you go to Medina. Go tomorrow. Buy your ticket and plan to go tomorrow. That's the first thing. The second comment I have is for the sister who talked about discussing this with someone in your office. I've had conversations with people in my office, especially when I arrived at work on Monday, and there was a one-sided statement from my company on the company website saying, attack on Israel. I mean, that just burned me. So I picked up a conversation with one of my friends. I said, yes, what happened in Israel is terrible, but the response of Israel is disproportionate. They're saying it's a war on Hamas. Please be aware. It's your tax dollars that are being used to wage this war. When you drop a bomb on a hospital, is that war? When you drop a bomb on the route that people are using to retreat to Egypt, is that war? That's not war. That's a war crime. When you cut off food, water, electricity, you have to appeal to their common sense so that it kind of counters the propaganda that they've heard on the news. Because what is being said constantly on the news is that this is war on Hamas. It's not war on Hamas. It's war on a civilian population. When you drop a bomb on a building where people live, that's not war on Hamas. That's a war on a civilian population. Mm-hmm. When you see kids writing their names on their arms, on their legs, so that if they're blown up, they'll be able to be identified, that's not something our kids should be doing. That's not what our kids in America are doing. So when you appeal to them like that, hopefully they'll understand. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for those beautiful thoughts. And I want to second that. That's something that we don't talk about enough, the fact that Palestinians should go to Palestine and non-Palestinians, so Muslims should go to Palestine. So my family lives in the West Bank, so I have a Hawiyya, Palestiniya. And we used to ask our mom, like, why did you give us this Hawiyya? We can't go to the Quds, we're not allowed to go because we have the Hawiyya. If you just kept our US citizenship, we wouldn't have to deal with this. But that's why we have to keep our Palestinian citizenship. We have to keep it because to show that we have a presence there. And the Muslims that are blessed enough that you don't have to deal with that you can go to the Quds, that's a duty on you to go. So thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khairan, Basma, for doing this presentation. I've actually used this resource. I'm a special ed teacher in New York City, and my school is on the same block as Yeshiva University. And so that means my commute is filtered with pictures of Israeli people who are no longer accounted for, family members there. There's Israeli flags everywhere, and there's a huge presence of NYPD. Wearing the kafaya to work is not something that I can do all the time. If I was to wear it, I'm ensure I reroute myself. And in seeing the Palestinian toolkit from PACC, I've actually used that several times in reframing my conversation piece with my colleagues and my coworkers, but also the students that I interact on a daily basis. And I think us that are not from the Palestinian descent, it's on our shoulders to take this off the shoulders of our Palestinians, brothers and sisters. And I think I myself am a first-generation Pakistani American, and it's important that we put on some of that weight and we start reframing our narrative, and having conversations like this are important. But to the sister that asked, like, how do you start that framework? Within the toolkit, there's actually a PDF that talks about templates and scripts.
Yes,
and
I was gonna say that.
yeah, maybe it's the teacher in me, but like having a script and having a formulated way to speak that Kara has created for you. And I know in my son's daycare, there was a heavy police presence one day, and the one-sided narrative was for our Jewish students. And I said, when you do that, you are erasing my son's existence. You know, when you take away the chances for the sultans, the khans, the Arab students that are there, you're erasing their identity. And just having the mindful understanding or having that narrative from CARE allowed me to disassociate from my anger, because I know as a teacher I'm silenced every day from the Department of Education of being really mindful of how I'm speaking. And having these people like Basma, like Sister Rania, who's not here today, they give us the wording we might need to be able to take that deep breath in, the deep breath out, and really take the moment to remember what to say. So just to answer your point, really check out that toolkit. I don't think Basma did justice of how extensive it is, and take the time to study it, because you're right, our history is, it's been plagued, it's been bombarded, and we've been given this task of unlearning what we've seen on the media, but also unlearning and helping others unlearn what they've seen on the media. But in order to do so, I think there's a lot of patience we need to ensue, and a lot of education we need to put within ourselves, whether you want to call that masking or giving yourself the script of just knowing, like, okay, when this is asked of me, not if, but especially the younger generation, we've got this plight our adult parents might not have anymore, of like how we equip ourselves with when this is asked, when the but Hamas questions come, when the what is the kafaya question, kind of willfully teaching people and educating them as well. So thank you for coming up with that toolkit, Basma. I don't think she's giving herself credit for what she created. But
thank you. No, that was a very big group effort, and thank you. I was actually going to mention that. So we have the emails, CARE New Jersey. We are working with them in terms of incident reporting. If you feel like you had a very one-sided statement come out of your organization, your school, what a lot of school boards are even doing this, and no school board ever took political stances before, but suddenly they are. You have the right and the duty to make your voice heard. So if you feel they have the templates, you can use them. Those are in the toolkit. And then if you don't feel comfortable sending it on your own, CC the contact. So Aya Zaki is the lawyer at CARE New Jersey. So for any of these incidents, CC her so you'll have that backing. And then of course, always reach out to us. One other thing I want to say was, PACC is always welcome to any ideas and any people that want to come join and help and volunteer. Right now we have our Hope class, virtual, which teaches about Palestine. That's for high school students in spring. We also have the adult one, so that's Freedom is the Future, that teaches you about Palestine. And we also have an online conference. We have events regularly, and we welcome everyone to join. So follow the Instagram, join the email list, and please join and support us. We always welcome you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So we're going to do adhan and pray Maghrib. We can stick around for more questions if people want to know more. I think there's quite a lot of things that we need to talk about if you want to stay around. But let's pray the Maghrib, inshallah. And also there is coffee and tea outside with some cookies. Anyone who wants to have some. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you.